The American Revolution marks a pivotal moment in history, first for its role in establishing the United States, a nation whose economic and military influence is felt globally. The Massachusetts Minutemen who fired the shots heard around the world at Lexington and Concord likely had little idea of the eventual impact their rebellion against British taxation would have. Secondly, the Revolution's causes, liberty, representation, freedom, and independence, laid the foundations for social democracies in the following centuries. Figures like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and John Adams could not have foreseen the almost holy reverence with which their words have been treated since. While the effects of the Revolution may not have been immediately revolutionary, it's clear that the 13 colonies' struggle for independence from British rule has had a significant and lasting impact. As with any revolutionary moment, it's vital to examine the causes and progression leading up to the British surrender in 1783. Most studies of the American Revolution trace its beginnings to the 7 Years' War, 1756 to 1763, a conflict with the French over territory that ended with a British victory. The 7 Years' War solidified Britain's stance as the dominant European country, as it gained vast tracts of land. However, as Britain tried to increase control of its American colonies in various ways, colonists began rebelling. The expensive conflict led to new and unpopular taxes. The British government attempted to raise revenue by taxing the colonies, starting with the Stamp Act of 1765, followed by the Townshend Acts of 1767 and the Tea Act of 1773. This led to increasing resentment. The colonists felt these taxes were unfair since they were being taxed without representation in Parliament. The growing protests posed a simple question: why didn't the colonists have the same rights as British subjects? Two events in Boston in the early 1770s fanned the flames of resentment further. In 1770, colonial resistance was met with violence at the Boston Massacre, where British soldiers killed 5 men after opening fire at a protesting mob. In 1773, in response to the Tea Act, a group of Bostonians boarded British ships and dumped 342 chests of tea into Boston Harbor. These acts were catalysts for more resentment as retaliatory punitive measures from the British government further enraged the colonists. Massachusetts and New England were now seen as hotbeds of rebellion, setting the stage for escalation into war. In September 1774, a group of delegates met to address the situation. This First Continental Congress included George Washington from Virginia and John and Samuel Adams from Massachusetts. They did not demand independence at this first meeting but issued a declaration of the rights due to every citizen, including life, liberty, property, assembly, and trial by jury, foreshadowing what would come later. They were frustrated by taxation and the continued British military presence in the colonies, an issue that would soon escalate. In the time between Congresses, war broke out. On April 18, 1775, British soldiers marched to Concord to seize an arms cache stockpiled by colonial militiamen. The two sides clashed at the Battle of Lexington and Concord, marking the first formal battle of the Revolutionary War. This night also gave rise to one of the Revolution's heroic figures, Paul Revere, and the other men riding through the night to sound the alarm and prepare the Massachusetts militia. By the time the Second Congress met in the summer of 1775, with new members such as Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, anti-British views were entrenched. They voted to raise a Continental Army with Washington as commander-in-chief. Thus began a series of battles throughout the fall and winter, starting with the Battle of Bunker Hill in Boston. Though a victory for the British, these early skirmishes actually encouraged the colonial forces, inspiring them for the fight ahead. With more trouble brewing and no conclusive victories on either side, the colonists cemented their position on July 4, 1776, by adopting the Declaration of Independence. This momentous document was the first time a nation's people formally asserted their right to choose their government. Drafted by a 5-man committee, primarily authored by Thomas Jefferson, it famously stated, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed." These words, influenced by Enlightenment ideas, were a far cry from the European model of absolute monarchy. Though this statement referred to a small fraction of the population, excluding women, men without property, and slaves, it marked the revolutionary beginning of a long, imperfect process toward the democratic republic we know today. As the colonists declared independence, the British sent a massive fleet with 34,000 soldiers across the Atlantic to crush the rebellion. The Revolutionary War then settled into a pattern of wins, losses, and stalemates for several years. Military history enthusiasts can enjoy tales of Washington retreating across the Delaware River before launching a surprise attack on Christmas night, or reflect on the turning point through 1777 to 78 at Saratoga. The American victory at Saratoga was crucial, paving the way for France, sensing British weakness, to enter the war on the colonist side. What had been a civil war now became an international conflict. With the help of training provided by a professional army, notably from the French aristocrat Marquis de Lafayette, Washington's forces rallied in the north. In the south, the colonists suffered setbacks, with Benedict Arnold's defection to the British being the most famous of several mutinies in the Continental Army. The British occupied Georgia by early 1779 and captured Charleston, South Carolina, in May 1780 under General Cornwallis. However, a change of leadership in the American ranks led to Nathanael Greene coming to the fore. His forces managed to push the British back to the Yorktown Peninsula. With Washington also converging on the British, they were trapped and forced to surrender. Though contemporaries didn't necessarily see it that way, this surrender effectively marked the end of the Revolutionary War, with no further decisive action before the British signed the Treaty of Paris in 1783. In signing the Treaty of Paris, Britain formally recognized the independence of the United States, and the colonists were free to build their free and independent country. While the story of the United States is not the legendary march toward freedom and liberty often portrayed, from a weak confederation of 13 colonies in the 18th century, the U.S. became the most powerful nation in the world in less than 200 years. Some reasons for American success can be found in the rights enshrined in the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. The American victory was a kind of miracle, not only in the logistical nature of a ragtag bunch of farmers overcoming an imperial army, but also in the triumph of new ideas over entrenched monarchical systems. A new kind of politics and new ways of thinking had been born in history's greatest experiment, the United States. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.